Radiologist Professor Ashraf Salim is about to conduct the first ever virtual post-mortem of King Tutankhamun. To answer one key question: was Tut murdered by a blow to the back of the head?
For 3,300 years, the most famous face in history has been lying to us. What if the most famous face in human history doesn't belong to the person we think it does? For over a century, the golden mask of Tutankhamun has symbolized ancient Egypt itself.
The gold mask of Tutankhamun is recognized as one of the world's most famous works of art. Made of solid gold and weighing some 25 pounds, it's a masterpiece of early goldsmiths' work.
But new scientific evidence suggests it may be a stolen identity, a face repurposed in desperation. Beneath the gold, scans point to a name that was deliberately erased, a name belonging not to a boy king, but to a vanished queen powerful enough to be written out of history. This isn't myth or speculation. It's hard science colliding with ancient politics, exposing a frantic 70-day scramble, a monumental cover-up, and the possibility that Nefertiti's face has been staring back at us for 3,000 years. Egypt's greatest cover-up. To understand why this matters, we need to go back to the moment that started it all. November 1922, the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. A British archaeologist named Howard Carter has been searching these barren hills for years, burning through his patrons' money, finding nothing but sand and disappointment. He is on the verge of being shut down entirely when his workers uncover a step cut into the bedrock. Then another, then a sealed doorway bearing the unmistakable marks of ancient royal necropolis guards. Carter sends a telegram to his financier, Lord Carnarvon, and waits in agony for weeks until Carnarvon can travel from England. When the nobleman finally arrives, they break through the outer door together. They find a corridor filled with rubble, clear it, and reach a second sealed door. Carter chips a small hole in the corner and raises a candle to peer inside. His hands are trembling. Carnarvon asks if he can see anything. Carter's response has become immortal. Yes, he whispers, wonderful things. What lay beyond that door was a treasure hoard that defied imagination. Golden chariots gleamed in the candlelight. Jeweled thrones sat waiting for a king who would never return. Painted statues stood frozen mid-stride, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders. Alabaster vessels, gilded shrines, weapons, games, furniture.
Inside this chamber alone, Carter and other members of his excavation team found and recorded almost 700 objects. Strange-looking animal figures, statues, and gold.
Everything a pharaoh might need in the afterlife was crammed into those small chambers in magnificent chaos. But the real prize was deeper still. Past the antechamber, past the treasury, past layers of golden shrines nested one inside another like the world's most precious Russian dolls, lay a stone sarcophagus. Inside that sarcophagus were 3 coffins, each fitting inside the next. And inside the innermost coffin, wrapped in linen and resin, lay the mummified body of a king who had been dead for over 3,000 years. On his face was the mask. 22 pounds of solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, the color of midnight sky, and turquoise, the color of the Nile at dawn. Eyes of obsidian and quartz that seemed to hold some secret knowledge, some awareness of the intruders disturbing his eternal rest. The ancient Egyptians believed that gold was the literal flesh of the gods. This was not jewelry, this was not decoration, this was sacred technology, a device designed to help the pharaoh's soul recognize its own body when it returned from the underworld. Without that recognition, the spirit would wander lost forever, denied the paradise it had earned. On the back of the mask, artisans had carved a spell from the Book of the Dead, divine words of protection for the perilous journey through darkness. The world went absolutely mad for it. King Tut became the most famous pharaoh in history, more recognizable than Ramesses the Great, more iconic than Cleopatra. The golden mask became the universal symbol of ancient Egypt, reproduced on posters and t-shirts and coffee mugs and Halloween costumes. It toured the globe, drawing millions of visitors who waited in lines stretching around city blocks just to spend a few seconds in its presence. For a century, the narrative remained unchanged. This was the face of the boy king. This was the masterpiece created specifically for Tutankhamun. This was perfection. But almost from the beginning, there were whispers, small details that did not quite fit, inconsistencies that experts noticed but could not explain. And the more closely people looked at that mask, the more the questions multiplied.
Ekman proved that every part of the mask was made from the same gold. That strongly suggests the entire mask was made at the same time, but using different techniques to give the gold a variety of colors.
The 70-day impossibility. Here is the first problem, and it is a big one. King Tutankhamun did not die peacefully in his bed after a long illness that gave everyone time to prepare. Modern CT scans of his mummy reveal that he shattered his leg shortly before death, likely in a chariot accident or a fall. The bone shows no signs of healing. Infection set in, and within days, the boy king was dead. Ancient Egyptian religious law was absolute on the matter of royal burial. A pharaoh had to be mummified and entombed in exactly 70 days. Not 71, not 69, 70. This was not a suggestion, this was cosmic law. The 70 days corresponded to the period when the star Sirius disappeared below the horizon, a time when Osiris, the god of the dead, underwent his own transformation in the underworld. Miss that window, and you condemned your king's soul to an eternity of wandering. Now think about what that 70-day deadline actually meant. In just over 2 months, you would need to complete the mummification process itself, which involved removing organs, drying the body with natron salt, wrapping it in hundreds of yards of linen, and performing dozens of precise religious rituals. You would need to carve an entire royal tomb from solid limestone, including multiple chambers, corridors, and a burial vault large enough to hold a stone sarcophagus. You would need to gather thousands of burial artifacts, everything from furniture to food to games to weapons to clothing. You would need to construct 3 elaborate coffins that nest perfectly inside each other. And you would need to create a 22-pound solid, gold death mask with microscopic details, precious stone inlays, and hand-carved hieroglyphic spells from scratch. For a death nobody saw coming. Does that sound possible to you? The architecture of panic. Now let us look at the tomb itself. If you compare Tutankhamun's burial place to the tombs of other pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings, something immediately stands out. It is tiny, embarrassingly small. The tomb of Ramesses II stretches for hundreds of feet and contains over 60 chambers.
Egypt's Valley of the Kings, the burial site for the pharaohs 1,000 years before Christ. It's just yielded up one of its deepest secrets. The latest find is thought to be the tomb of Ramses.
Tut's tomb has 4 small rooms and a corridor. Some Egyptologists have speculated that it was not even a royal tomb originally, that it was a noble's tomb that was hastily repurposed when the king died without proper preparations. The wall paintings inside support this theory. Some of them look unfinished, as if the artists dropped their brushes and walked away mid-stroke. The colors have not been properly sealed in some places. There are visible corrections and do-overs. Most telling of all, the massive stone sarcophagus that holds the coffins has chipped corners. The working theory is that panicked workers literally had to smash pieces off the sarcophagus just to squeeze it through doorways that were too small. This was not the meticulous, reverent burial of a god king. This was a rush job. This was controlled chaos. And when researchers started examining the other treasures in the tomb, the pattern continued. Many of the artifacts were not made for Tutankhamun at all. Statues bore faces that looked nothing like his known depictions. Jewelry was designed for a woman's body, with proportions too delicate for a male pharaoh. Coffins had names that had been scraped off and recarved, and not always carefully. The ghost outlines of the original inscriptions were visible if you knew where to look. Something strange had happened during those 70 days. Something desperate. Then researchers looked at the mask again. Really looked. And they noticed the ears. The pierced ears. Each of the mask's ears has a small hole, a piercing. In the modern world, that might seem like nothing. But in ancient Egypt, it was a screaming red flag. Earrings were worn by children and by women. Adult male pharaohs did not wear earrings. An adult male pharaoh on his sacred burial mask, the device that would identify him to the gods themselves for all eternity, would never, under any circumstances, be depicted with pierced ears. It violated everything the Egyptians believed about kingship, masculinity, and the divine order of the cosmos. And yet there they were, two perfect holes. Some researchers also began commenting on the face itself. It looked too delicate, they said.
These bone fragments lying loose within the skull cavity. Meaning what? Meaning that these bone fragments got inside after mummification.
Almost feminine. The cheekbones were higher than other depictions of Tutankhamun. The chin was softer. The overall impression was of someone more mature and more refined than a teenager who had barely begun to grow into his features. There was also the gold to consider, when viewed under certain lighting conditions. The gold of the face had a subtly different tint than the gold of the headdress surrounding it. A slightly warmer, more reddish hue. If the entire mask had been cast as a single piece, or even assembled at the same time from the same batch of gold, that color variation should not exist. A theory began to form, one that was almost too disturbing to contemplate. What if when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, there was no mask ready for him? What if the priests, racing against the 70-day deadline, grabbed a mask from someone else's tomb? What if they modified it just enough to pass as the boy king's face, altered the features, plugged the ear holes, scraped off the original name, and carved his in its place? What if the entire world had been fooled for 3,000 years? That question led inevitably to another one. Whose face was it originally? The Vanishing Queen. Her name was Nefertiti. Even if you know nothing else about ancient Egypt, you have seen her face. Famous painted bust was discovered in 1912, showing a woman with an impossibly long neck, perfect symmetrical features, and a knowing smile that rivals the Mona Lisa. She was the wife of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who tried to overturn the entire Egyptian religion and replace all the gods with a single deity, the sun disk called the Aten.
Nefertiti's early life is also still a mystery. Her father was probably vizier to Pharaoh Amenhotep III, so she would have been brought up in a royal palace.
She was also Tutankhamun's stepmother and possibly his mother-in-law as well, since Tut married her daughter Ankhesenamun. But here is where it gets interesting. After Akhenaten died, Nefertiti did not fade into obscurity like most royal widows. Some historians believe she did something unprecedented. She seized the throne herself. There is evidence, contested but compelling, that she ruled Egypt as pharaoh under a new name, Neferuaten. If true, she would have been one of only a handful of women in Egyptian history to hold that ultimate power. And then she vanished. Completely. Her tomb has never been found. Her mummy has never been identified despite DNA testing of numerous candidates. She simply disappears from the historical record as if someone erased her on purpose. Some scholars believe her body may be hidden in a secret chamber behind Tutankhamun's tomb. Others think her burial was destroyed or moved in antiquity. The truth is, we have no idea what happened to her. But consider the timeline. If Nefertiti died shortly before Tutankhamun, she would have had a burial mask prepared. A magnificent golden mask befitting a pharaoh. A mask with pierced ears because she was a woman. A mask with delicate, mature, feminine features. A mask bearing the throne name Nefertiti. And if Tutankhamun then died suddenly, with no mask ready, those desperate priests would know exactly where to find one. A catastrophe in the museum. For decades, the Nefertiti theory remained unprovable. You could not test it without damaging the mask, and no one was going to authorize drilling holes in the most valuable artifact on Earth. The hypothesis was whispered about at academic conferences, dismissed by the establishment, relegated to the realm of interesting speculation. Then, in 2014, fate intervened in the clumsiest way imaginable. A worker at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo was performing routine maintenance on the mask's display case. Somehow he bumped it. The long braided beard, one of the most sacred symbols of divine Egyptian kingship, snapped clean off. This was already a disaster. But what happened next made it infinitely worse. Instead of calling conservators, instead of following any kind of professional protocol, museum staff panicked. They grabbed the first adhesive they could find, industrial-strength epoxy glue, the kind you would use to repair plumbing. They globbed it onto the broken beard and the golden chin, shoved the pieces together, and prayed nobody would notice. Everyone noticed.
For decades, the mask of Tutankhamun has been the most glamorous monument in the Cairo Museum, which explains why the damage to the statue and its repair has had such a media frenzy.
The glue was visible. Smeared across the chin of the world's most famous archaeological artifact was a streak of hardware store adhesive. The internet erupted. Egypt's greatest treasure, which had survived 300 years of tomb robbers and wars and shifting sands, had been damaged by impatience and incompetence. The Egyptian government brought in an international team to fix the catastrophe. Leading the effort was Christian Ekman, a renowned German conservator. His job was to remove the epoxy and reattach the beard properly using ancient techniques. But Ekman saw an opportunity in the disaster. With the mask off display and available for study, he could finally answer the Nefertiti question once and for all. His weapon was X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. By analyzing the chemical composition of the gold at different points on the mask, he could determine whether the face had been soldered on from another source. Different batches of ancient gold would have slightly different trace elements. If the face came from Nefertiti's mask, the XRF scan would prove it. His team spent months conducting the most comprehensive analysis ever performed on the artifact. They scanned every millimeter. They analyzed the gold composition at dozens of points, and their conclusions seemed definitive. The gold in the face matched the gold in the headdress perfectly. The hieroglyphs spelling Tutankhamun showed no evidence of having been carved over an earlier inscription. The delicate glass inlays around the eyes were completely intact, and if anyone had soldered a new face onto the mask, the heat would have cracked that glass immediately. Case closed. The mask was made for Tutankhamun. The Nefertiti theory was dead. Ekman's team removed the epoxy and reattached the beard using beeswax, just as the ancient Egyptians would have done. The mask went back on display. The textbooks remained unchanged, but not everyone was convinced. The blind spot. A small group of scientists argued that Ekman's technology, while sophisticated, had a fundamental limitation. X-rays can see density differences. They can detect cracks and voids and modern solder joints. But what if the ancient craftsmen were far more skilled than anyone gave them credit for?
Tutankhamun's mask is an icon. And I think part of it is because it is made of solid gold, and a lot of people get wowed by that.
What if they used gold from the exact same batch to plug the ear holes, hammering it so precisely that the seam was only a few atoms thick? What if they beat the original inscription perfectly flat before recarving, leaving no void spaces for X-rays to detect? What if they attached the replacement face from behind using pressure heating techniques that left the front surface flawless? X-rays would see nothing. They cannot read the history of metal. They cannot tell the difference between gold that was poured into a mold once and gold that was reheated, hammered, and reworked. The atoms remember what happened to them. The X-rays do not. To detect that kind of evidence, you would need a completely different approach. You would need technology that could read the thermal memory of matter itself. And by 2024, that technology existed. The quantum revelation. Dr. Helena Voss is a materials physicist at the Max Planck Institute in Munich. Her specialty is quantum resonance imaging, a technique so advanced that it barely exists outside classified government laboratories. The scanner works by bombarding a surface with precisely tuned electromagnetic pulses and measuring how individual atoms respond. If those atoms were ever subjected to specific kinds of stress, specific temperatures, specific pressures, the scanner can detect it. The metal tells its own story. In late 2024, Dr. Voss and her team secured permission from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities to scan the mask. On paper, it was a calibration exercise, a chance to test their equipment on ancient gold. Nobody expected to find anything that Ekman had missed. The scan took place after the Grand Egyptian Museum closed for the night.
This isn't just a museum. It's a celebration and reclamation of Egypt's history and culture. The pyramids that adorn the walls are a link between the past and the present. This is ancient Egypt brought back to life.
The mask sat motionless under the beam while data streamed onto laptop screens in real time. For hours, everything confirmed the existing consensus. The gold composition was consistent. The craftsmanship was superb. There were no obvious signs of modification. Then the scanner focused on the cartouche, the oval frame containing the royal name. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, an Egyptologist from Cairo University who was present that night, later said the room went completely silent. On the screen, beneath the carved hieroglyphs spelling Tutankhamun, the quantum imager was detecting something that should not exist. A pattern of atomic displacement found nowhere else on the mask. Evidence that the gold in that exact location had been hammered, scraped, and reworked in ways that differed dramatically from the surrounding metal. Someone had beaten the original hieroglyphs into oblivion and carved new ones over them. Dr. Voss ran the scan again. Same result. She recalibrated the equipment. Same result. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a metallurgist from Kyoto University who joined the team remotely via video link, said she could not process what she was seeing. The data was unambiguous. The cartouche had been altered. But that was only the beginning. The ghost beneath the gold. The team ran a full structural analysis of the mask, scanning every surface with the quantum imager.
Scientists have been using the latest imaging and forensic technology to unlock long-buried mysteries, to reveal the man behind the mask.
What they found dismantled a century of scholarly consensus. First, the ears. Ekman's X-rays showed solid gold. The quantum scan revealed something very different. Two perfect cylindrical plugs, exactly the right diameter to fill a piercing hole. Someone had inserted rods of gold alloy identical to the surrounding metal, then hammered and polished them until no seam was visible to any technology that existed before 2024. The pierced ears had been plugged. The mask originally belonged to someone who wore earrings.
The lobes of the ears, each shaped differently, are pierced for earrings.
Second, the face itself. The quantum imager detected what Dr. Voss called thermal ghosting around the entire perimeter where the face meets the headdress. This is a molecular signature left when metal is heated to a specific temperature and then cooled. The gold along that exact boundary had been superheated to a different degree than any other part of the mask. The ancient craftsmen had not soldered from the front. That would have cracked the glass inlays, exactly as Ekman predicted. Instead, they had attached the new face from behind using high-pressure heating techniques that left the visible surface absolutely flawless. The seam was invisible to X-rays, but the atoms remembered. The face had been cut out and replaced.
The face could have been changed in antiquity and replaced.
The room was silent for a very long time. Dr. Hassan was the first to speak. He asked if the scanner could reconstruct what had been erased. Dr. Voss said yes. By mapping the microscopic traces of the original hammering, the ghostly impressions of the first inscription, the computer could digitally rebuild what had once been carved there. She initiated the reconstruction program. It took 11 minutes. Slowly, stroke by stroke, the original hieroglyphs materialized on the screen. The name that emerged was not Tutankhamun. The name was Nefertiti, the throne name that historians believe Nefertiti used when she became pharaoh. The cover-up revealed. The quantum scans told the entire story. When King Tutankhamun died suddenly, unexpectedly, without proper preparations, his powerful successor faced an impossible situation. That successor was a man named I, possibly Nefertiti's own father.
The man in charge of where and how the young king was buried was his successor, the pharaoh I,
who would briefly rule Egypt after Tut's death. I, some scholars believe, may have even stolen the grand tomb that had been originally planned for Tutankhamun for his own burial. The priests serving the boy king were trapped. They had 70 days, no mask, no options. So they went to the tomb of the previous pharaoh, Nefertiti. They took her burial mask, and they went to work. They plugged her pierced ears with gold from the same batch, hammering until no seam could be detected by the technology of the time or any technology that would exist for the next 3,000 years. They commissioned a new face bearing the boy king's features. They cut out Nefertiti's face and attached the new one from behind using pressure heating so precise that the joint was invisible to every examination except one that read the memory of atoms. Then they hammered her royal name flat and carved his in its place. They buried their king wearing a stolen face, and they buried the truth along with him. The mask still gleams under museum lights, silent and certain. Yet its silence now feels deliberate. If a queen's identity could be stripped away and hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years, then this was never just about a burial or a boy king or a single act of deception. It was about control over memory itself, about deciding which faces survive history and which are erased. Somewhere, the truth is still incomplete, waiting in unfinished data, unopened tombs, and artifacts we think we already understand. So the real question isn't whether this story is true. It's how many others like it are still buried. When history finally speaks back, are we ready to hear what it's been trying to tell us all along?